What's up, family? Welcome back to another installment of Bible Study with an Ex-Pastor, where we are walking through the Bible with fresh eyes. And really the big thing in this series, as I say kind of every time, it's not a theological dive. That's not what this is about. We're walking through it, looking back over and really kind of exploring some of the things we thought about this when we were younger. For me, some of the things I thought about it when I was a pastor, as well as when I was on the fringes of the faith, and things what I think about it now as someone who is completely identifies as an atheist. And so we kind of share some of those things, and so I'm glad that you're here with me. We're going to be picking back up. We've started in the book of Genesis, made it all the way to chapter 18. So before we jump in and dive in, I would like to remind everybody, if you haven't already, go ahead and like this video. And then don't not only like, if you haven't subscribed, let's do that too. So that way you get notified every time we drop new content. So you can hit that bell. Share this content if you know anybody that this would be valuable for. And then feel free to engage and comment. And by saying that, I will also say I apologize that I wasn't able to engage with you all last week, or not last week. I think that was Monday. Time goes by so fast. I apologize for not being able to engage with you in the live chat Monday. I ended up being called into a meeting last minute, but such is life. But I'll definitely be interacting with you on this one. At least I hope so. I probably shouldn't say definitely, but I'm going to do my best because this is kind of important to me. All right, so last week we left off, we made it through, I said chapter 18, we made it through chapter 15. So we'll be picking up today with chapter 16. And this is a very popular story. And I was just kind of looking over it a little bit before I got ready to sit down in front of this. And I was like, ooh, I have some thoughts. So let's go ahead and just kind of dive straight in. This might be the quickest I've ever dived in these series. So let's go. And I think I do have my screen shared. So it says, now Sarah, or Sarai, never knew exactly how to pronounce that. In my mind, it was always Sarai. But now Sarah, Abram's wife, had not borne him a child, but she had an Egyptian slave woman whose name was Hagar. I mean, they just put that right out there. There's an Egyptian slave woman here. So Sarah said to Abram, and let me go ahead and pause there real quick. And this is for anybody who may be believers, who may be theist or deist or what may have you on here. And you may want to come back and say, well, I know that word slave is there, but it could be servant. Yeah, I'm not good with that either. So whichever way you want to flip it, I'm not good with it. You can make it indentured servanthood, slavery, free labor, minimum wage. Either way, I'm not happy with this at all. But anyway, so there's an Egyptian slave woman whose name was Hagar. Mind you, they don't really do a good job of walking through this explanation of how Hagar got into the care of Abram. Now, of course, we can use somewhat context clues and say this would have happened when Abram went and infested Egypt, with his STDs, and so on. But instead, they don't actually go into detail because, according to the writers of the Bible, at least for that time, slaves aren't important, whatever. All right, so let's go to verse 2. So Sarah said to Abram, see, now the Lord has prevented me from bearing children. Please have relations with my slave woman. Perhaps I will obtain children through her. And Abram listened to the voice of Sarai. Now, I actually like the way this is written. This may be, I like the way this is written because this would probably be an honest, I don't want to use the word accurate, but this would probably be an honest representation of what a person who would have been living during these alleged times would have thought about the world. So it is very likely that a person who was not able to have children at this time would have correlated that, as some people still do today, as the Lord has punished me, or a God has punished me, any Lord, whichever, doesn't really matter, pick one. But this idea that somehow nature or the personification of nature is the reason why I am not able to do the same thing that other women are able to do. So if this society views the primary purpose of women being to produce children then that could be an honest thought that those people would have, is that if I'm not able to produce children, then the Lord must be preventing me from having children. Which I didn't mean to do a sociological, psychological deep dive here, but I want you to wrestle with how damaging such a thought process, can be, or such an ideal could be, if you're thinking that literally someone who you believe, or what something that you believe is more important than you, something, as we often say, higher than ourselves, which I don't really know what that means. But if if you say that this is something that you have, that if you believe this is more important than you, you believe this is the most important thing in the world, this thing has ordered everything and is the reason why everything happens, and the reason why things don't happen, then you attach that reason to your life, even though you may or may not have done anything wrong. For sure, you haven't done anything that actually correlates with your inability to have children. In that context, you will begin to believe that this God has judged you for some things, and that can be incredibly psychologically damaging. And even in today's time, which is probably about 4,500 years separated from the alleged times of this incident, we still do have people who do suffer with those types of issues and beliefs, even not just around pregnancy, but just around the idea of healing. Period. All of a sudden, you feel like something is wrong with you. That is a top struggle in many marriages, where this superstitious ideology, where a woman's purpose is connected with her ability to give birth, um, can often be very damaging. All right, so but I like that she says it here. She says he prevented me. Now notice, and what I actually liked about this is that nowhere in the scripture does it actually say for this story that the Lord prevented her from that. And so I did like that, because, and that's why I said it's kind of honest here. Whoever's writing, has a good idea of what people would have thought around that time. So I like that, which obviously they should, and that's pretty standard, for certain parts. Now, there are some parts in the Bible that are trying to presuppose other parts, and typically it's like they're trying to flash back and pretend like they're flashing forward. It's that type of thing, and in those type of things, you can fairly point out those inaccuracies fairly quick if you're informed. All right, so after Abram had lived 10 years in the land of Canaan, Abram's wife Sarah took Hagar the Egyptian, her slave woman, and gave her to her husband Abram as his wife. So, the first thing we see here, I remember reading this as a kid thinking, wait a minute. But, because remember, as a kid, I was not saved. I'd gone to church with my family. And I like to remind people of this, because people will claim to have never been saved. They're like, oh, I was never a Christian, but now I am. And I lived horribly, but now I know the Lord is real. And 9 times out of 10, those people are saying that they never had any connection to Christianity. And they're lying. I'm not saying all of them are, but 9 times out of 10, they're lying. They were raised, for the most part, culturally Christian, especially if you lived in the U.S., unless you just lived in some area that was, you know, um, off to the wayside or something. But for the most part, quite a large percentage of people in America, whether they identify as something else or not, typically are culturally religious. And then you have to remember there's a great deal of Christians who do not identify as saved, but still identify as Christians. Um, as a black person, I can easily use artists and athletes. Many of our artists and athletes identify as Christians, but they do not identify as saved. And many of them don't even identify as believers. They just believe they're Christian because it is a cultural representation. So anyway, but being culturally Christian, the one thing I knew for sure is that God wasn't into the multiple wives things, or at least that's what I thought I knew for sure, right? So reading this as a person who's already been inculcated in cultural Christianity as a child, you read over it and you're like, oh, Abram's wife is giving him a wife. What a sweet gift indeed. I guess I don't know, what's going on. So, verse 4. Let me get my mouse over here. Then he had relations with Hagar. Yes, he did. And she conceived. Look at that, with no help from the Lord. Now, you remember, Eve needed help from the Lord to conceive. Hagar didn't need no help at all. Her and Abraham had that thing taken care of. I'm sorry, Abraham's not here yet. It's Abram. All right, so she conceived, and when Hagar became aware that she had conceived, her mistress was insignificant in her sight. Mm. And that's kind of like when your own theology comes back and bites you in the ass, right? Because and we see that is a part of Sarah's theology. Sarah's theology is that the Lord has prevented me from having a baby. And so Sarah decides, well, what I'll do is I'll make a way where we can have a baby. So this way we can have an heir. And then Hagar, she has the baby. And the moment she has the baby, she realized, wait a minute. All right, so this whole time I've just kind of been in a slave relationship, and of course I'm fan fictioning here. I've been in kind of a slave relationship with you all, so I'm sure I looked at myself as less than, and I'm obviously not the boss in the house, and God honors your people and not my people, or that your God is the best and my God is not the best. So you kind of have all these different dynamics, and then all of a sudden I sleep with your husband, and he been sleeping with you for a minute, and ain't no baby popped off in you, and he sleeps with me one time and a baby popped off in me, and so maybe I know popped off, right? And so maybe that means that I'm really the one that God is looking after. See, that's what happens when your theology bites you in the ass. You accept something that doesn't make sense, then somebody else can take that same thing that doesn't make sense and use it against you, and that seems like what the Mistress Hagar is doing. She said, okay, it's my turn to be the jackass. All right, y'all done been a jackass for a little bit. Let me be the jackass. Because obviously you determine this all by who God is blessing. And God is obviously not blessing you in this case. God is blessing me. If God prevented you from having a baby, then God blessed me to have a baby. That's what happens when your theology comes back and bites you in the ass. So Sarah and Abram's theology is doing some biting. And so Sarah said to Abram, he said, "Hey, may the wrong be done to me be upon you." And I think I want to read that differently. It says, "May the wrong be done to me be upon you." And you kind of read that, especially if those of you who watch The Color Purple, it'd be like, "Till you do right by me, everything you do gonna fail." That type of thing. But it's really not. I don't think now looking at that with fresh eyes, I really don't think that's what she's saying. It's not like. Hey, all this stuff she doing, is you. It is kind of, but I think a clearer way to say that, hey, she ain't disrespecting me, bruh. She disrespecting you. Because I feel like that's how a woman would come off, and I may be wrong. I am not the spokesperson for women in any shape, form, or fashion. As a matter of fact, in this particular moment, I am being rather facetious, but I still wanted to be clear there. But I feel like at this moment, she would have been telling Abram, like, Abram, this girl, I know you see her disrespecting me and you're not doing anything. But at the end of the day, it's not me she's disrespecting. It's your order because you, the head of the house, God made you first. And now she disrespecting stuff that is supposed to be entrusted to you. What kind of man are you? So I imagine the conversation went a little bit like that. Um, and she says, I put my slave, listen, the ownership, the audacity of these people, right? I put my slave woman into your arms. But when she saw that she had conceived, I was insignificant in her sight. I'm the one that put her in the position. And now that things are actually happening, she looking at me like I'm the one that's done something wrong. May the Lord judge between you and me. And again, I kind of think what she is doing is the reverse of what Adam did. Because Adam said, like, hey, it's the woman you gave me. In this sense, she's like, hey, it's the woman I gave you. But not only that, I kind of like this language. May the Lord judge between you and me. And to me, I kind of feel, and again, I'm fan fictioning here. I kind of feel like this is a reference back to the garden, in a sense of what she's saying is since you're the head of the house, may the Lord judge you as the head. You know, this isn't my problem to fix. This is your problem to fix because you're the head of the house, and that type of thing. Now, obviously, I don't believe in no head of the house stuff like that. That's an IRS designation. That's the only thing I can think of. I wouldn't want to marry someone who's less than me. I wouldn't want to be in a relationship with someone who I feel is less than me. I wouldn't want to be in a relationship with someone who I feel cannot be logical. I wouldn't want to be in a relationship with someone who I feel cannot be entrusted to make decisions. And I would not want to be in a relationship with someone who absolutely needs me to lead them. I do not consider that marriage. I consider that captivity. And if that's you, blink twice if you need some help. All right, so let's go. So but Abram said, verse 6, but Abram said to Sarai, whatever, look, your slave woman is in your power. Do to her what is good in your sight. Wouldn't it have been nice if the version of God that we believed in, for those of us who were Christians, especially for those of us who were charismatic Christians who believe God was an interventionist, wouldn't it have been nice if the version of God we believed in would have like intervened right here? Would have been like, hey, Abram, Sarah, I know y'all been having this little conversation, but I really need to make something clear. I didn't create anybody to be your property. Conversation never happens. God never intervenes. God never comes in and says, Hagar doesn't belong to either one of you. She's an entire human being. Nope, God is A-okay as far as this point. Because we know he's watching. He always watching. In this point, he decides, no, that conversation's safe. I don't see any flags on the play there. No, follow through. And so Abram literally gives Sarah the right to mistreat Hagar. And mind you, Hagar hasn't actually mistreated Sarah. She just no longer sees Sarah as significant as she once did before. And a better way of saying that is she no longer sees Sarah as more than she sees herself. And in this sense, the biblical approach here is to punish her for no longer seeing herself as less than. Yes, there is a little villainy in there because that has been much of my experience as a black man living in the South in Alabama. That at any time I have ever tried to assert my right to exist, and the fact that my existence doesn't need anybody else's permission, and I don't have to feel less than, it has always been problematic. But the good news is I'm good at solving problems. Let's lock and load. All right. So Sarah treated her harshly, not insignificantly, harshly. All right. This is for those of you who are believers and Jews, Christians, and Muslims. This is your father, Father Abraham. This fictional, horrible person. This person, like I don't know how you're part of a patriarchal religion and you just letting Abram's wife tell him what to do. I don't think you're doing this right. No. You're doing patriarchy wrong if your patriarchal system starts with Abraham being pushed around by his wife. I'm not an alpha male or anything, but this kind of sounds beta. All right, again, facetious but accurate. So Sarah treats her harshly, and this is a human being who's being mistreated for no other reason than realizing that she is just as significant as anybody else in the story, possibly realizing that she is more significant. And technically, as an Egyptian, Hagar is more significant historically than any other character in this story. I'll let you figure out why. Well, I'll help you. One people group in this story, there's a lot of evidence for. Another people, okay, you get it. All right, yeah, I didn't have to go there. All right, and I am in no way trying to say that there is no evidence that children of Israel never existed. I am trying to say that that evidence is highly limited and is as is complexly compromised as is the evidence for the 12 apostles' existence. So I will put it in that frame. Yep. So let's go. Treated her harshly and she fled from her presence. Verse 7. Now the angel of the Lord found her by a spring of water. Oh, I used to love this because I think this is where God reveals himself as Jehovah Rohi, that may be the God who sees. Hallelujah. Now the angel of the Lord found her by a spring of water in the wilderness, by the spring on the way to Sure Value. That's how I'm going to read that. I don't know. Now, those of you that are not in the States, well, those of you who are not in the southern states, you may not know what Sure Value is. but it's a cheap grocery store, and sometimes they have breakfast. He said, Hagar, slaves. He said, Hagar, slave woman. No, wait a minute. Okay, hold up. Why is God talking like this? The Lord. This is, or I'm sorry, the angel. This is the angel of the Lord. Which, by the way, there are many Christian circles who teach that every time you see the angel of the Lord show up in the Old Testament, that's Jesus. Hi, poor people. Okay. So this is the angel of the Lord who finds her by a spring of water. And I'm not gonna say too much on this because this is me being a little asinine here. But if it's an angel of the Lord and he works for a God who is omnipresent, did he find her or did he just go to where she was? If he found her, that's just like he was just randomly walking and all of a sudden, oh, Hagar, Sarah's slave woman. And why would God acknowledge, or the angel of the Lord, someone who works for God and who works very closely with God, closer than any man has ever worked with God, an angel, I would presume, because he's around the throne all day singing holy, 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 which is confusing because then how does he have time to come down here? And I know, well, other people say, well, there's three classes of angels. There's warriors angels, there's messenger angels, and then there's worshiping angels. And it's like, okay, point to that scripture and verse, never mind. It's all comic. All right, um, but yeah, why would the angel of the Lord be like, Sarah, slave woman, Hagar, Sarah, slave? I'm going to say your name, and then I'm going to disregard your name by saying Sarah, the person who owns you, slave woman. From where have you come and where are you going? And I've actually preached this scripture before. In my research, I actually preached this scripture as an atheist. All right, so here's a little secret. As an atheist, all right, and I mean full blown atheist, just not out the prayer closet. I did pastor a Baptist church for 3 months as an atheist. I did. I did. One of the worst experiences in my life. And I was like, oh yeah, I'm never doing this again. But yeah, it was a missionary, well, they weren't even missionary Baptist church. They were part of the National Baptist Convention. Very, very unorganized, very old. But I thought that maybe it was a place that I could kind of hide, for lack of better words, and still do good work. So I could stay there, and then I could use scripture to perhaps help these people get more acclimated with their own culture. And it was actually working for a while. Preached some really amazing services that, or at least I thought they were amazing at the time, because I was like, oh, they can't even tell that I'm slipping this other stuff in here. And then I was like, oh, they really can't even tell that I'm slipping this other stuff in here. So they're actually not really paying attention to it. It's the performance that they're enjoying, which I'm not mad at that, but that's just not why I'm doing it. And so, but yeah, so I did do that for a little bit. And I did preach this: wherever you come from, where are you going? Just to kind of make that direct correlation, I didn't have to work very hard to preach that because Dr. King, one of his speeches and one of his books was also based off of Hagar's story, because Hagar, if you're a black Christian and you're a black Christian who's trying to, find some identity for yourself in the Bible, which is weird. Why would you be looking for your identity in a book that is from the Middle East? Yikes, and I'm not saying there's not an African presence in the Bible. There is an African presence in the Bible. Obviously, we're talking about Egypt right now, but that's just a weird place to be trying to get your identity from. But because we felt, you will hear many black people say that I am Christian first. Before I am a black person, I am Christian. I think that weird lady Priscilla Shirer says it all the time. And I'm just like, we get it, but no, you're actually human first. So let's start there. How about? Okay, I'm rambling a little bit, but it is beautifully poetic language here. From where have you come? And where are you going? Now, I don't know what the fuck the angel was talking about, but I know I've used that when I've preached it to deal with more of taking inventory of your current predicament. How did you get here? And where do you plan to go from here? That's how I've preached that before. And of course, as that Baptist church, I preached that as a cultural message, mimicking the message of Dr. King himself, who, here's a little sneaky secret about me. I wasn't that big of a fan of Dr. King. Love him, love his work, not a big of a fan. Don't feel like I have to be a fan. there's a lot of people who did great things that I wasn't a fan of. So I'm hoping that I'm not even hoping. I already know my subscribers are solid on that, but I feel like I'm going to have some people say some things there. But it's okay. I was definitely more Malcolm than Martin. And I'll tell you, one of the things that actually sickens me to my stomach to this day is when people make the comparison between Martin and Malcolm, and they say, well, Martin was the peaceful one and Malcolm was the violent one. That is the most disgusting lie ever. Okay, and I'm going to tell you why that's a lie. Malcolm was not involved in any violent altercations his entire career as someone speaking up for our people. There was no violent altercations. All of Dr. King's altercations was violent. Just because he wasn't the one causing the violence doesn't mean he did not lead several of our people into violent altercations. So to mischaracterize and say because one stood for peace and one was willing to be violent, to mischaracterize that and say one was peaceful, one was for peace, and one was for violence. No, that is a misunderstanding and a mischaracterization of civil disobedience. The whole purpose of civil disobedience is to identify the violence. So that's which is why I'm not saying Dr. King was wrong for that. I'm saying that is a mischaracterization to say that he was the peaceful one and Malcolm was the violent one. Malcolm was the peaceful one. Dr. King was the violent one. Integration is violent. It's friction. There's a lot of friction in it in the beginning. And Dr. King understood that. And he felt that the best response to that violence was passive resistance so that other people could see the ugliness of that violence. So now do you see how disingenuous that mischaracterization is? And it actually robs us of actually seeing what these two men actually stood for. There was never a time that Malcolm X stood out and said, just go out and be violent to people. He just said, you have a right. If someone is being violent towards you to defend yourself, which by the way is a part of the American legal system. So yeah, I'm sorry. I need to chill out with these rants. Y'all gonna stop following me after a while. All right, so where are you going? And she said, I am fleeing from the presence of my mistress, Sarah. And of course, when I preached this, I told you I had a lot of thoughts here. When I preached this, what I noted was that Hagar answered half of the question, but not the other half. And I'm telling you how I preached it. Now, again, now I'd be more mad that the angel even called her a slave or that the angel had any audacity to treat her like this was her problem. But I would love to use this to highlight that this is a major thing that Christians actually do. And this is some of the justification that they get behind that. When someone else is mistreated, when someone else is abused, when someone else has been done wrong, the Christians will typically team up on that person and make them feel like it is their responsibility to make it right. Which is, by the way, I am going to do an entire video on forgiveness. And I don't know if I'll be able to make that one short. I am going to try to get better at putting some more short content out on here so that way just everybody has options. But y'all know I talk a lot. And once I sit down in front of this mic, oh my God, stuff just, I'm just going to have to get a talk show, man. All right. So she says, I'm fleeing from the presence of my mistress. And actually, I did realize this mindset or highlighted this mindset as an issue in my community, and I'm sure in other communities as well. When you spend most of your time determining what you're trying to get away from and never determining what you're trying to get to. The question was, where have you come from and where are you going? She only answered where she came from. And I know in my community, I often run into that same problem that people are more so concerned of where they come from. Don't forget where you come from. Don't let anybody make you forget where you come from. Now, don't you get out there and start acting like you don't know where you come from. But the problem is we are indeed out here acting like we don't know where the hell we're going. All right. See, that's how I would have preached it, I probably said what the hell, but sometimes I would have. Sometimes I would have. Here's a secret. This is gonna make some of my white followers uncomfortable, and I'm sorry, but I just have to be authentic here. My last few years of preaching, one things that I really wanted to happen, and I'm just being honest. If you get mad, I'm sorry. One of the things that I really wanted to happen is just at any moment while I was preaching, I just really wanted somebody to stand up and say, preach, nigga. And so maybe that'll get to happen now. I don't know. I'll never say it again. But anyway, I said it, but I can't. It's my story. It's my life. It's true. That's really what I wanted. Someone almost did it in one service because they told me, and I was like, I wish you would have, because as you all can tell so far, when I was a pastor, I was a little different. So my church was kind of like the hood church. And as you can kind of tell, I'm not necessarily the hood guy, but I was just trying to be like Jesus. And my version of Jesus was like, yeah, he was out here hanging out with drunk folk and prostitutes and stuff like that. So who am I not to be hanging out with drunk folks and prostitutes and stuff like that? I'm not better than Jesus. Even though now, if you ask me today, I kind of do feel like I'm better than Jesus. Actually, I feel like most people are better than Jesus. Not just better than Jesus, but actually better off than Jesus as well. And yeah, that's it. All right. Okay. Yeah. See, by the way, for those of you who are wondering, like, how does his accents and personalities just change over and over and over again like that? Like, I have like 300 million people living in my head. You have no understanding. If you've ever seen Split, that's what it'd be like. Everybody in here fighting for the light. I promise you. I know, I'm just playing. All right, because I don't want to make light of that, but you know, this is comedy time, fan fiction, right? Everything's safe here. What happens in Bible study stays in. Ooh, I think that might be problematic. I think that's already the church rules. All right. Okay. Okay. What happens in Bible study stays in Bible study. I want that T-shirt now. Okay. Um. So the angel of the Lord said to her, "Return to your mistress and submit to her authority." Last time I preached this, I do remember preaching that the angel gave her this command because she had no plans for herself. She had no autonomy, no agency. All right, then if you're just going to be out here by yourself, and I preach that as consequences, that if you're literally out here not going to have a plan for where you're going, then this is pretty much is what's going to happen to your life. You're always going to have to be submitted to somebody else's authority. Whether you're their slave or not is an entirely different other concept. But I use this to talk about just how life, if you're only obsessed with your past and you're not even, the least bit concerned with your future, then that's probably why you always feel like other people are over you. And that's just because you haven't taken personal responsibility for your own life, which I often find is connected to what a person believes about their own capacity. I know for me, as a Christian, I honestly believe that there was nothing I could do without the Lord. Now, I didn't honestly believe it, but I believed that I honestly believed it, right? There was nothing I could do without the Lord, but I was doing a lot of shit without the Lord, and I'm not even talking about bad shit, but I mean, just a lot of things that I could do without the Lord. But at the same time, I was like, no, I can only do things through Christ who strengthens me. All things are possible. It's no longer I who live, but Christ who lives in me. I've crucified the deeds of the flesh. All of this good stuff, and ultimately, you end up treating yourself like you're fragile and that you're not capable of making any decisions. And when you do treat yourself like that, you're gonna kind of doom yourself to a hard life until you come out of that, because your whole life is always going to be dependent on the kindness of other folk, right? And that is kind of slave living at that moment. You're definitely living like a slave, in my opinion, if kindness for your life has to come from other people. If you haven't made the decision to be nice to yourself and to recognize what that means, and to recognize how to do something about it. And that's the thing, we all have to figure out how to do something about it. And that's the hard part, that's the hard part. But one of my favorite quotes, and it's probably not from one of the best people in the world, but I do love the quote, and that was, give me liberty or give me death. Um, that's kind of how you got to treat your life. You got to treat your autonomy like that. I'm not saying go out there and, just be like, nah, kill me. No, I ain't saying that. But I am saying, love your freedom, love your sense of self, love your sense of autonomy. Because if the angel of the Lord would have been telling me, hey, no, you got to return to your mistress and submit to her authority, I'd be like, you can return to your mistress and submit to her authority. But I left, and I do not go backwards. And I really don't. Actually, when I leave, I don't go back. I've never dated an ex in my entire life. Like, why do people do that? I just don't understand it. So I don't go backwards. If I was a member of a church and I left that church, I don't become a member again. I'm one of those people, especially more so now. Like when I was a Christian, you, except for in the relationship aspect, you had some possibility of maybe getting me to come back around. But now that I am 100% okay with being myself and trusting my ability to see the world as it is, I don't go back. Once you've shown me who you are, I'll take this line from Tyler Perry. When a person shows you who they are, believe them, you know. And I'm just so valuable. This is how I feel about myself now. I'm just so valuable where you don't get 3 or 4 or 5 times to mess me over. No, you don't. You don't. No, you get one chance. You get one chance. That's how valuable I am. That's how sacred I am to me. You get one chance. And the good news about that is it's really hard to do me wrong because I'm an adult and so I don't depend on anybody else to really do much for me. Not just to be like I'm an island out here, but no, like if it's really hard. But people have found ways. All right. So verse 10, the angel of the Lord said to her, I will greatly multiply your descendants so that they will be too many to count. So it seems like God just going around giving everybody the same gift. Now, this sounds like a cheater. You know, when a guy buys one wife, one thing, and then he buys a side piece, the exact same gift, well, I mean, I guess the fact that he has a side piece makes him a cheater. But the fact that he's buying the side piece a gift, and at this moment, that is kind of like what this story is being told. Like Abram and Sarah are the main dish. Abram and Hagar are the side piece. It's like a two-side porno tape. Side A is Abram and Sarah. Side B is Abram and Hagar plus a baby. All right. So she gets this promise. The angel of the Lord said to her further, behold, you are pregnant, and you will give birth to a son, and you shall name him Ishmael, because the Lord has heard your affliction. It's such a beautiful story. God says, I've heard your affliction, and I'm not going to do a damn thing about it, but I'm going to give you a lot of kids. Isn't he such a good God? All right. the name Ishmael. All right, verse 12. But he will be a wild donkey of a man. Well, fuck you too, God. And his hand will be against everyone, and everyone's hand will be against him, and he will live in defiance of all of his brothers. And I remember probably when I was 13, 14, maybe even 15, what was being taught in a lot of the charismatic evangelical circles was that this was a reference to Islam, or less politically correct, but this was a reference to Arabs. This is how that was kind of put, and this, and I want you to hear how dangerous that is. That was the mindset, like literally, that this scripture is the reason why there is so much destruction in the Middle East. This is how this was preached. This is how this was taught on a Wednesday night Bible study. Is the reason the Middle East is having so much trouble. The reason why there can't be peace in the Middle East is because they are the descendants of Ishmael and they are wild donkeys of a people. That is dangerous. That is, yikes. That is absolutely dangerous. Oh, I want to do something right here, but it'll probably get me canceled. So I'm not going to do it. Instead, I'm going to leave you in limbo thinking about it. Yes, I do have whiskers and I do not trim them. And why don't I trim them? Because I don't care about stuff like that. That's not important to me. And if you're the type of person who cares about that and says like, hey, I would listen to him, but I really don't like his mustache and beard, then trust me, you're not the person I'm reaching for. I promise you. Much love, but you're not the one. All right. So, and everyone's hand will be against him. Verse 13. Then she called the name of the Lord who spoke to her. You are a God who sees me, Jehovah Rohi. For she said, have I even seen him here and lived after he saw me? That just makes no sense to me. All right. Then she called the name of the Lord. There's an angel of the Lord, and I'd have a bunch of questions there. But okay, so let's talk about this as if this happened for real, right? As if, and of course we know that this didn't happen for real, but let's talk as if it happened for real. Hagar, she's running away from Sarah, all right, and then somebody appears to her, all right, and this person presents themselves and says, "Hey, I'm an angel of the Lord." Where is the prove it conversation at? Where is the question that says, who's the Lord? Where's the question? Because these are at the time monotheistic people, at best, henotheistic at worst. Which Lord are you? Are you an angel? None of those questions happen. And so these are one of the ways when you know a story isn't exactly being told to provide any level of truth, because no level of truth is provided. And again, fables are often written in this way, which this likely, well, not likely is, this definitely is. I feel like I can say that. I can. Um, but you are God who sees me. Have I even seen him here and lived after he saw me? Who are you asking this question to? Who are you asking yourself? Because then that makes me feel like you know you're hallucinating. Because she says it. She says, have I even seen him? No, you didn't. You have hallucinated. You've made this up yourself. Therefore, the well was called that. Uh, Bier Lahai Roi. Behold, it is between Kadesh, oh, the glory, and Bered. Yeah, wherever those places are. So Hagar bore a son to Abram, and Abram named his son, to whom Hagar gave birth, Ishmael. Abram was 86 years old when Hagar bore Ishmael to him. Does anybody wonder how old Hagar was? Yeah, another thing that doesn't often get discussed, because Hagar is supposed to be a non-person ultimately. You know, she's not supposed to be important. She's just a side part to the story, and Ishmael will be okay. Now in other cultures, specifically some Islamic sects, Hagar is highly important. Yes, indeed. All right, so let's continue. Chapter 17. Now, when Abram was 99 years old, so a lot of time has passed, the Lord said to Abram and said to him, I am God Almighty, walk before me and be blameless. Now, it's so funny to me that, God, what type of God goes 30 whole years without talking to somebody? This is ridiculous. But I guess he was trying to get everybody used to him not being around. I will make my covenant between me and you, and I will multiply you exceedingly. And Abram fell on his face and talked with him, saying, and God talked with him, saying, As for me, behold, my covenant is with you, even though I also just made a covenant with Hagar, but we're not going to talk. And some believer might jump on and say, but he didn't make a covenant with Hagar. That was different. I don't think you know what the definition of covenant is. All right, so as for me, behold, my covenant is with you, and you will be the father of a multitude of nations. No longer shall you be named Abram, but your name shall be Abraham. For I have made you the father of a multitude of nations. I will make you exceedingly fruitful, and I will make the nations of you, and kings will come from you. I will establish my covenant between me and you and your descendants after you throughout their generations as an everlasting covenant, to be God to you and to your descendants after you. Now watch this. This is a covenant is ultimately just a contractual relationship. That's all a covenant is, right? It's a commitment. It's an agreement, and in this case, it's a verbal agreement. I agree to do this. You agree to do this, even though there isn't much you agree to do here. Just God says, I'm going to do a lot of things for you. And but the thing that I did that I often find interesting, and this phrasing you will hear throughout the Bible a lot, to be God to you and your descendants. Like, that word means absolutely nothing. It's a generic word. The very first video I did, coming out as an atheist, was on this very subject of the disingenuousness of using God. But even in this case, if it wasn't, which let me take a look just so I can see what it is. Yoink. Let's make sure you and be God. Elohim. Yep. I'm going to be God to your people. So, questions. If you're going to be God to our people, what the hell were you before? Right? Like, yeah, I will be a God to your people. If you are God, why are you not already God to the people? That makes absolutely no sense. But then there's another problem. All right. Because I like to walk that walk. All right. And so I know believers are going to say, but no, God is not generic, as you claim. God is his name. Or you take it that step further if you got a little bit of learning and you just saw the screen. No, it's Elohim, and Elohim is his name. And by the way, Elohim is not a name in Canaanite culture. Elohim is not a name of God as the pantheon of those gods, such as like in Egyptian, you have the Ennead and the Ogdoad. Those are not gods. Those are the names of the pantheons of the participating gods. And in this case, that's what Elohim is. But hey, I'll play with your delusion for a minute. Let's just say this Elohim character, even though he speaks in us's and we's, is a one character. Fine. This sentence still doesn't make sense. Because then, if Elohim is a name, that's me saying, and I will be Darante to your people. That says absolutely nothing. You know? So it makes more sense if it said, I'll be a father to your people, because at this point, God has not been a father yet. Or I'll be a protector to your people, because definitely God has not been a protector up to this point in scripture. Or I will be even more of a provider to you and your people. But no, that's not the statement that's made. The statement that's made is, I will be Elohim to your people, which for me, as a person who looks at things critically, the first thing I begin to think there is that even the people who were writing the story were not fairly acclimated with the concept of Elohim. And that's kind of clear because these are people who have been separated from traditional, I don't know if traditional is the best word, but from historical Canaanite life. Canaanite life has been squandered and all of these different things, and these people decide to agree differently. All right, or to identify differently. There we go. So God said to Abraham, now as for you, you shall keep my covenant, you and your descendants after you, throughout their generations. This is my covenant, which you shall keep between me and you and your descendants after you. Every male among you shall be circumcised. This is the covenant. God says this is the covenant. The covenant is everybody has to cut off the tip of the dicks. This is how we start this covenant. And that's so weird because God made the dicks, right? We're supposed to believe that God made the dicks. And so if God made the dicks, but then he says my covenant is then you just kind of chipping off the dick, then okay, wow. This now, like, because where my mind went is that this is the temple of the Lord, right? Now, mind you, that's not a scripture that I used a lot because I felt like most people misunderstood it. And I didn't believe Paul was God, nor did I believe Peter was God. Truth be told, I didn't even believe Jesus was God. So, yeah, these are my confessions. But, one of the major, much of the major arguments against doing anything to your body is that you're not supposed to change your body. You're fearfully and wonderfully made, but yet here God's covenant is like, hey, you remember that dick that I made for you? I think I left too much meat around the ends. Let's cut some of that off. And this is odd. This is odd. This is an odd moment. But notice here, the writing here is odd for me as well. Because I think the way I've read this is that this shall be the sign of my covenant. And that's not what it says. It doesn't say this will be the sign of my covenant. It says this is my covenant, which you shall keep between me and you and your descendants after you. Every male among you shall cut the tips of your dicks off. That's the covenant. It's very odd because then if that's the covenant, and even if that's the sign of the covenant, it means the only way to know if you're dealing with somebody else who is of this covenant is if they get bucky naked. And remember, I told you, God loves them bucky naked hug parties. Better ask Adam and Eve, who told you you were naked? Come on now. In the words of Jay Witt, come on, somebody. All right, verse 11. And you shall be circumcised in the flesh of your foreskin, because he wanted to give details here. There's not a lot of details in other places, but just in case they weren't sure what circumcised is, let me take it a little further. Every male, right? And it now this shall be the sign of the covenant between me and you, which means you literally, when you're engaging with somebody that you're not sure, is a part of the covenant, you got to take a peek. Let me see. Prove to me. That reminds me of a Friends episode where Joey had an audition, and I think they used some Play-Doh or some bologna because he had to be, authentically Jewish, and he was not. No, he had to be. authentically not Jewish. Was that how that was supposed to be? Yeah, that's weird now. And every male among you who is 8 days old shall be circumcised through your generations. I thought the 8 days thing was just, arbitrary. Including a slave who was born in the house or who was brought with money from any foreigner who is not of your sense. Any slave who was born in the house or who was bought with money from any foreigner who is not of your descendants. So not only not so we got to chop everybody up. That's horrible. A slave who is born in your house or who is bought with your money shall certainly be circumcised. So my covenant shall be in your flesh as an everlasting covenant. God dang. But as for an uncircumcised male, one who is not circumcised in the flesh of his foreskin, that person shall be cut off from his people. He has broken my covenant by being born, by the way, because that's how that works. So by being born the way that I actually made him, he has broken my covenant. That's what that says. I am not making it up. It says for an uncircumcised male, and can be any, right? Y'all did know that, right? If something says and, it can also be any. Like if something says a, it can also be any. So it's like if someone says, "Do you have a Klondike bar?" They can also be asking, "Do you have any Klondike bars?" Okay. So anyway, so it literally says, "But as far as any uncircumcised male, one who has not had his dick cut, this person shall be cut off from his people, because this person has broken my covenant." That's the original sin, being born without a cut dick. That's crazy. This is weird. Why did we read this to little kids? What the fuck is wrong with us? Let's continue. Then God says, "Oh, are we going to cut on her?" Then God said to Abram, "As for your wife Sarah, you shall not call her by the name Sarah, but Sarah shall be her name. I will bless her, and indeed I will give you a son by her. Then I will bless her, and she shall be a mother of nations. Kings of people will come from her." Have they, though? Then Abram fell on his face and laughed, and said in his heart, "Will a child be born to a man 100 years old? And will Sarah, who is 90 years old, give birth to a child?" Okay, now I think I found this odd because Abraham isn't the first person to give birth to children at an old age. I may need to cross-reference that, but I don't think that's the case because everybody prior to this moment is living to like really, really, really long times. And I think I remember someone having children as old as 300 something while they were in their 300. So this part didn't make much sense to me. Like preachers preached it that way, like, "Oh, it's such a shock that Abraham had a child at 99." I'm like, but not in the context of the story. That's like watching that's like watching Star Wars and then you see somebody do lightning out of their hands and you're like, "Holy crap, that's unbelievable." Like, have you not ever watched Star Wars? That's basically every fight scene. So I don't know what the shocker is here. All right, so but I would also like to point out that in Sarah's covenant, she does not have to get cut. Neither her nor Hagar. So it sounds like they got the better end of this particular deal. And Abram said to God, "Oh, that Ishmael might live before you." But God said, "No, but your wife Sarah will bear you a son, and you shall name him Isaac, and I will establish my covenant with him as an everlasting covenant for his descendants after him." Hold up. Wait a minute. What? Okay, you said you were going to establish your covenant with me and my descendants. And then I say, "All right, go Ishmael." You say, "No, not Ishmael. Ishmael is one of my descendants." So it seems to me that God doesn't seem to know how genealogy works here, right? Which is very likely because, which you'll see, there are quite a few concepts that overlap and interplay. And one of those concepts, there is some bit of matriarchy present in the Bible. Not as something to be held up, but it is present there. And a part of there's another word. It's not matriarchal. There's another word that I want to use there. It starts with matri, not matrimony. No, no. But it's the type of societies where the blood, the blessing or the right of inheritance is passed through the mother's lineage, not the father's lineage. And so the writer could have some of those type of bathwater, baby, bathwater type of thing. Um, and so, but now in this case, God is, even though he's already told Hagar, like, yeah, I'm making a covenant with him and he's going to be great too. People are just going to fight him, but he's going to be great. Now he's telling Abraham, but like, no, not Ishmael. Like, I'm doing Isaac instead, which that sounds problematic. But as for Ishmael, I have heard you. I will bless him, make him fruitful, and multiply him exceedingly. He shall father 12 princes, and I will make him into a great nation. But I'll establish my covenant with Isaac, whom Sarah will bear to you at this season next year. When he finished talking with him, God went up from Abraham. God went somewhere. So again, this God is not omnipresent. Um, then Abraham took his son Ishmael and all the slaves who were born in the house, and he did the deed. He cut everybody up. Well, at least he didn't swallow everybody up like Bishop T.D. Jakes. So, well, maybe that would have been better, though. I don't know. So now Abraham was 90 years old when he was circumcised in the flesh of his foreskin. They're really pressing this point. As a matter of fact, they're going to say it again in verse 25. And his son Ishmael was 13 years old when he was circumcised in the flesh of his foreskin. And on this very day, Abram was circumcised. As you know, it's like it's really driving the point home. And then verse 27, circumcised again. All right, so let's go to chapter 18, and we'll close up here. We'll see if we can finish with chapter 18. Yeah, and I don't think I want to go any further than 18. Well, let's take a look and see what 19 looks like right now. Just to did I click it? Did it go? The Tomb of Sodom. Yes, we want to pick up there next week. So let's finish 18 as soon as I can get. Well, my internet's taking forever. There it is. Okay, so. Now the Lord appeared to Abraham by the oaks of Mamre while he was sitting in front of the tent in the door of the heat of the day. When he raised his eyes and looked, behold, 3 men were standing opposite him. And when he saw them, he ran from the tent door to meet them. And then he bowed down to the ground. Now, I get that from a TikToker. He's pretty cool. He does food, and it's amazing, but that's always the accent he does, and I love it. And said, My Lord, if now I have found favor in your sight, please do not pass your servant by. That was actually one of my favorite songs in the church world, especially because I got saved in a black church, but majority of my ministry was in mixed churches, multicultural churches. But by the time I started pastoring, the one thing you find out is that when you're a pastor, is that people of other races do not feel comfortable following black people in religion. This is why majority of black churches are black churches, but you can find quite a few churches with white pastors or Hispanic pastors or even Asian pastors that have a large black following behind them. But when you're dealing with black pastors, you don't find that as much. And so, which was a shocker for me when I became a black pastor. The things that shock you, right? But I had to get into hymns a little bit. I didn't get into a lot of them. I never liked hymns growing up. I still don't like old church songs. I thought they were creepy. It was like Cover Me in the Blood and shit like that. I'll pass. But one of the songs that I did like was Pass Me Not, O Gentle Savior. And it wasn't necessarily the words that I liked so much. It was hearing Fantasia Barrino sing it in her movie. Watching her sing that down the aisle, I was like, girl, you brought some power to this song. But you kind of see that right here, too. And then I think Fred Hammond did There was a blind man on the roadside. Fred sings high. And he heard a commotion, yeah. It was Jesus passing by. I can't get all the way up there, but cry out. I used to love stuff like that. So he says, if I found favor in your sight, please not pass your servant by. Please let a little water be bought and wash your feet and make yourself comfortable under the tree. Okay. All right, I kind of see. And I will bring a piece of bread so that you may refresh yourselves. After that, you may go on, since you have visited your servant. And they said, so do as you have said. So again, as a child, thought this was weird. And this was definitely stuff that reinforced this as mythology for me. Because here is a situation where Abraham is seeing what he believes is the Lord, and then it becomes 3 men, which I'm assuming are type of angels, and this does have like some of those Greco-Roman mythology features to it here, and so he's like, oh, let me bring some water and wash your feet. See, that's jumping the shark for me, right? Like, because if you're supernatural, then you're not natural, and there's nothing that this natural water should do for your unnatural feet. I don't. Sorry, I don't get it. Like, I can wash your feet, but you can't intervene. Come on now, bruh. No. So, and I will bring a piece of bread. We saw that. Verse 6. So Abram hurried into the tent to Sarah and said, quickly prepare 3 measures of fine flour, knead it, and make bread cakes. Abram also ran to the herd, I almost said herd, and took a tender and choice calf and gave it to the servant, and he hurried to prepare it. He took curds and milk and the calf which he had prepared and set it before them, and he was standing by them under the tree as they ate. Now, there is something that stands out to me about this language that I won't go into too much detail in, but there are some fringe concepts that are coming to mind right now, and it's mainly because of this focus of being under the tree. And so that is very interesting because when you're dealing with Hebraic literature, there is allegedly um, these phrases that mean other things. Like, so you'll have places where it talks about your thigh rotting off or somebody doing something with your thigh, and that could be dealing with genitalia or uterine type of things, right? And which is why, again, I say the English language has just done a lot of damage here, and because I don't think a lot of translators wanted you to always know what this actually meant. But I am wondering now if it just seemed, because I do know under the tree has some other connotations in other Hebraic literature, and so I'm wondering because they mentioned it at least 3 times in this one. It might be 2 times, but I'm thinking 3 times so far in this chapter, and so I'm wondering what exactly is Abram doing with these men under the tree? Just, hey, what does under the tree mean? I almost want to be like Siri, what's under the tree? But I don't have Siri. I don't. I do have Alexa though. And they said to him, "Hey, where's your wife Sarah?" And he said, "They're in the tent." He said, "I will certainly return to you at this time next year, and behold, your wife Sarah will have a son." Well, hey, maybe it was Sarah that was under the tree. Hello. And Sarah was listening at the tent door, which was behind him. Now Abram and Sarah were old, advanced in age. Sarah was past childbearing. Why do we consider that this is advanced in age at this point in the story? Like it's just like all of a sudden everybody's living to long times, and now it's odd for somebody to be 100. That's so odd to me. And you can tell that is what I would like to call an anachronistic imposition. Um, so Sarah laughed to herself, saying, after I've become old, am I to have pleasure, my Lord being old also? But the Lord said to Abraham, why did Sarah laugh, saying, shall I actually give birth to a child when I am so old? Why does the Lord not seem to know anything? Like, this is a person who doesn't get social cues, right? Like if you're out and somebody said, you're out, you're talking, there's a bunch of people and you're all a little elderly, and somebody says, man, the doctor told me I was pregnant. I laughed my behind off. If you're the person and you sit there and you say, well, what's funny? Why is she laughing? I'd feel like you might have an issue with understanding social cues. Like maybe you can't read the room. Maybe like context is not your friend. Like understanding what the hell is going on is far from you at this moment. And so far, God seems to be that type of character. He definitely seems to be the type of person who is a light bulb, but just not as bright as it could be. You know what I'm saying? Like not the smartest Christian in the book. Like not the brightest crayon in the box type of thing. Like not the heaviest brick in the bucket. You know what I'm saying? All right, I'm gonna stop. I'm gonna stop. Um. So, is there anything too difficult for the Lord? Like he seems confused about his own capability. Why is Sarah laughing? Is anything too hard for me to do? It's his own incredulity. Well, obviously, there's a lot of things that are too hard for you to do. Obviously, creating a perfect dick is one of those things that was too hard for you to do. Building an ark was another thing that was too hard for you to do. Putting the cherubim with the flaming sword around the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, too hard for you to do. Making people who could actually follow your instructions, too hard for you to do. All right, we're back. At the appointed time, I will return to you. This time next year, Sarah will have a son. Sarah denied it, however, saying, I did not laugh, for she was afraid. And he said, no, but you did laugh. doesn't God sound petty at this moment? Then the men rose up from there and looked down towards Sodom, and Abram was walking with them to send them off. The Lord said, "Shall I hide from Abraham, what I am about to do?" I've heard this preached a few times. Since Abraham will certainly become a great and mighty nation, and in him all the nations of the earth will be cursed, blessed, for I have chosen him, so that he may command his children and his household after him to keep the way of the Lord, doing righteousness and justice, by cutting off the top of the dicks, so that the Lord may bring upon Abraham what he has spoken about him. And the Lord said, "The outcry of Sodom and Gomorrah is indeed great, and their sin is exceedingly grave. I will go down now and see whether they have done entirely as the outcry which has come to me indicates. And if not, I will know." I will know means I do not know at this moment, which is why, again, I've been stressing this, and I'm actually stressing this not just for us, the non-believers, but also the believers who jump in here and say, "Well, God is all knowing." So far, we're pretty deep into this book, and there's nothing in here that indicates that this God is all knowing. So far, now we're gonna go through the whole thing. Maybe it may get boring after a while. We'll see. But so far, this God is absolutely not all knowing, and he just said it himself. He just says, "There's this outcry coming from Sodom and Gomorrah, but I honestly don't know what the hell is going on. So I'm gonna go down there and check it out." And see if I think it is what it is, and if it's not what it's supposed to be, then I'll know. That's literally how this is written. And if God's voice was important like Jesus's was, they would have wrote it in red here. But of course, Jesus is the true God, right? No, no, okay, all right. So then the men turned away from there and went towards Sodom, while Abram was still standing before the Lord. And Abraham approached and said, "Will you indeed sweep away the righteous with the wicked? Suppose there are 50 righteous people within the city. Will you indeed sweep it away and not spare the place for the sake of the 50 righteous who are in it?" Does Abraham not know who the fuck he's talking to? Does Abraham not know that this is the same guy that literally just destroyed everything that was on the face of the earth, except for trees, apparently, except for trees and plants? No, like, does Abraham not know that? Like, does he not know his own lineage? Does he not know how he got here? Do they not bow down and thank their lucky stars for Noah every damn day? Like, what the fuck is going on here? So, like, he's talking to this God. He's like, "Wait a minute. You the type of guy that would just destroy everybody, even if there's a few handful of good people there?" No, dude, this is the type of guy who will destroy every single body there and leave one family alive. That's the type of guy you're dealing with. And the fact that you don't know that, it makes it really hard for me to believe that you're actually having a conversation with this guy. It actually makes it hard to believe that your people have preserved any type of history of what has happened at this time, you know, in the story. It seems Abraham's ancestors had not been keeping a record of the things that they believed that God had done or had not done, because in this sense, Abraham seems not to know that the God he serves is a mass murderer. But he's about to find out. So he says, suppose there are 50 in there. Will you spare the place for the sake of the 50? And he says, "Oh, the 50 cent down there, you spare it for 50, right? Far be it from you to do such a thing, to kill the righteous with the wicked, so that the righteous and the wicked are treated alike. Far be it from you. Shall not the judge of all the earth deal justly?" This is Abram kind of calling God on his spot. But the problem with Abram's dialogue here is that this God is not given any evidence of being a just God. This God has not called himself the judge of all the earth at any moment, though he has taken some judge-like characteristics. And this God is overall not interested in the majority of the people on the earth. He's only interested in one or two people at a time, and those one or two people have to be related to some other people. So this God is kind of a racist. So Abraham replied, so the Lord said, "Yeah, if I find 50, I'll spare the entire place." And Abram, "So now I venture to speak to the Lord, though I'm only dust and ashes. Are you?" Suppose the 50 righteous are lacking 5. Will you destroy the city because of 5? And he said, no, I will not destroy it if I find 45 there. And so they go through this account. Now, as a young person reading this, I was like, okay, this makes absolutely no sense because Abraham is going back and forth with God. And so you can almost kind of, if you think back, because most people who've read the Bible as children, you got this far at very least. So by the time you got this far, you're thinking, okay, now first, God didn't know what the fuck he was doing in the garden. And I mean, you think that as a child, maybe not in those words, maybe in those words, right? But you think that, and then you get to Noah, and you're like, holy shit, this God really fucking sucks. And then you get to Abraham, and the reason that you felt that way in Noah is because he repented that he made men. And so this is a God who's supposed to not change. This is God who's supposed to make no mistakes, and he's repenting, which means he made a mistake. And then you get to this story, and this is a God who cannot make up his mind. This is a God that can be bargained with. This is a God that someone else can rationalize with and reason with. That's so that was hard for me as a child reading that. Like, what? No, that's not how that would work. If this God is who other people claim this God to be, then this is not how this would be happening. So yeah, this is obviously personification here. And he said, I'll do it on the count of 40. And he said, what about 30? And he said, I'll do it on 30. What about 20? I'll do it for 20. What about 10? And I'll do it for 10. So then he said, oh, may the Lord not be angry, and I shall speak only this once. Suppose 10 are found there. And he said, I will not destroy it on account of the 10. As soon as he had finished speaking to Abram, the Lord departed, and Abraham returned to his place. This is probably one of the most useless stories in the book of Genesis. No, there's some more. I just had a buttload of them just like run through my mind immediately. A bunch of useless stories in Genesis. Actually, I can probably say there's a bunch of useless stories in the whole Bible. But just because they're useless doesn't mean they're not precious. And it doesn't mean they're not valuable, just you can't use them for much. um, the value is that they're a part of our own human history. The stories are obviously not a reflection of our human history, but the ideas in the stories are obviously a reflection of ideas that have come from humans. The only people who would be justified in believing anything differently are the people who believe that these stories are true. Because then those people would believe that these ideas come from, the divine. But for those of us who believe that these stories are not any true representation or reflection of how life actually is, that's then we'd recognize that everything in this book is a reflection of humanity, including God, the God in the book or the gods themselves. So this one was boring to read. I even hated reading. Well, just 18, 16 and 17. And that was kind of fire. 18 was boring, which is why I wanted to get it out of the way because it's kind of like the precursor for chapter 19, where we'll kind of get into some of the details of what's going on in Sodom and Gomorrah and what's going on with Lot and his daughters. Lot's daughters. Y'all remember that story. And so this is really just kind of the precursor that shows that Abraham is this really righteous guy and God is not. That's pretty much what you get from here is that Abraham is like, hey, maybe you shouldn't kill everybody. And God is like, I think I should. I can be convinced, but I think I should kill everybody. And then Abram tries to walk him down. And of course, we got down to 10. I think it goes down to 5 in the next one. And of course, God can't even find 5 righteous people, which makes no sense because remember, Lot's household is supposed to be just as or nearly as large as Abraham's. Remember, that's why they had to separate. So surely there should be at least 10 people in Lot's family. Surely there should. Remember, but when Abram came out, came out of wherever he came out of, he had 380 people with him. 380. Remember, because we talked about those people. And so now he just asked if there just be some righteous people there. And apparently, Lot's household doesn't fall in this number, but God does still save Lot. So very interesting because God counts Abram's household based off of Abram's righteousness. So why wouldn't he count Lot's household based off of Lot's righteousness? And some people say, well, maybe that's because Lot hadn't chopped his dick yet. But then why would he save Lot at all? So, just doesn't make any sense. But none of it does. I think And so I think this is a natural place to close. And I think the best place to close, is there anything too difficult for the Lord? I think the truth of the matter is that everything is too difficult for the Lord because he doesn't exist. Thank you for joining me for this Bible study with the next pastor. I had an excellent time today. If you haven't already, please like this video. If this video did anything for you, if it made you laugh, if it inspired you a little bit, encouraged you, maybe even informed you or encouraged you to want to be more informed and learn more, that'll be a good reason to like the video. That would also be a good reason to subscribe to this channel to make sure that you're always getting content like this when we're putting it out. And maybe consider joining our Patreon or our YouTube membership community to help support continuing to get content like this out, and to join our growing community. And wow, it is growing. Uh, oh, excuse me, almost got choked. But that is all I have for now. Thank you all for joining me. Until next time, keep rising, stay progressive, and stay beautiful.